This is the Believe Crew podcast, and the business is you. Being an entrepreneur, no matter what stage of the journey, requires personal growth to sustain your success and create the ultimate life of abundance. I'm Jaime White, founder of Believe Crew and your host. Join me as I interview coaches, entrepreneurs, and authors that inspire us to go where they have gone. Be inspired today to grow and be the best you. Well, hello and welcome. And today we have with us Mark King. And my experience with Mark was he was actually the first one-on-one coach that I ever hired. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And so it was a great experience right from the beginning. And really, it came from listening to a Patrick Lencioni book, Getting Naked, the business fable Getting Naked. And I remember listening to that thinking, I want to meet someone that thinks like this and does this kind of work. And then within a year, someone had given me your name, and several sessions later, here we are. So I would love to hear from you, Mark, more about you, your business, and how you got into your business, just lots of questions. So can you start us off with something about you and your business and how you got started?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. So I have this, Krista and I, my wife Krista and I, we have this little thing where every once in a while I'll stop and I'll tell her stories. And she loves me to tell stories about us. And so I actually did this a couple of weeks ago. And I was just kind of reflecting on my career in specific and kind of telling her, sharing with Krista all the parts and pieces that God had put together, in my life, in our lives. So, so I am going to go back. So, when I was a young man of about 8, my parents were not churched. They did not go to church. They did not know God. They did not know Christ. And actually, my father was a Roman Catholic at one point, but got mad at them, and so that was the end of that. And so when I was 8, every once in a while, not all the time, but on Sunday morning, instead of doing what the family did, I would get up, I'd get dressed, and I'd go try to find a family in the neighborhood that wanted to go to church, and I'd go to church with them. Okay, and my my parents thought this was kind of crazy. Why would anybody want to go to church, right? So, that continued. And then I met my best friend, and we lived on the same block together for a number of years. He moved away, Jim, he moved away. And we reconnected our freshman year of high school. And he happened to be going to a Baptist church in Lombard, Illinois at the time, and he invited me. And so I went. Well, I mean, it was like, holy cow, I've got to be here. And so, from my family's perspective, here I am starting out my freshman year of high school. And now I'm going to church Wednesday night, Friday night, Saturday morning, Sunday morning, Sunday night. And they're like, what are you doing? And I think they expected the more traditional type things. And here I was going to church. So my freshman year, I remember I was in a Sunday school class, and Phil Miller was his name, and he brought me to Christ right in front of a group of my peers, and I accepted Christ, and I can remember just feeling so excited. I couldn't wait to get home and tell my parents I had accepted Christ. And so I burst in the door and I said, Mom, Dad, you'll never believe it. The greatest thing in the world has happened to me. I accepted Christ as my Savior. You should do it too. And they proceeded to decide that I had become a member of a cult, and I was at that point banned from going back to church. So here I am, a baby Christian. I just accepted Christ, and my parents, right? You have to honor your mother and your father. Banned me
Wow.
from going back to church.
Wow.
So that was really hard. But what was really interesting is that the separation from my parents started really clearly at that spot. And I don't tell many people this, but from the age of 11, um, my mom was a very fearful woman. I used to come home and she would want to talk about the things she was struggling with in her life. And this was every day after school. For years I did this. Okay. And this is when I learned about when people are so fearful and they're so committed to protecting their fear that protection of their fear is greater than their desire to progress. And that's where I fully began to understand. I didn't know at the time, but I began to understand the resistor mentality. And it was really because my mom just couldn't get out of the loop. So I probably did that for 6 or 7 years. Now I had other things going on. I mean, I was working, 25 hours a week. I was participating in sports. So I can't say I did it every night, but usually if I came home from school, that was usually the first conversation. And we usually spent, a couple hours at it every time it happened. So, in hindsight, that was preparation. God was preparing me for something. Then I went off to college, started going back to church, met my lovely wife, Krista, which was great. And I actually began to, I met her family, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, and my father-in-law, here I was, he and I couldn't have been more different. I grew up outside of Chicago, never been on a farm, didn't know that life at all. And he was a pastor. He was also a missionary. His hobby was farming, all this kind of stuff. So really, we didn't have anything in common. But the thing that my father-in-law did for me more than anything else is he believed in me before I believed in myself, and he taught me that leadership trait and what it really, because there was no reason for him to believe. He didn't have to. He didn't have to. He could just treated me like a potential son-in-law at some point, but he didn't do that. He kind of took me under his wing, and he was. he, I don't know. I tell the story all the time, but I don't know if anybody else has this. But you know how you kind of do. I'm sure you had it, Jamie. You do the first thing with your mother-in-law, right? And Kevin did the first thing with his father-in-law, and and I think what would it would typically be? Well, you might go to a ball game, or you might go fishing, or something like that. So I was visiting for the weekend at their home in Wilmot, and I got there Friday night, and my father-in-law goes, or my future father-in-law at the time, he says, "Hey, would you mind helping me on the farm?" I said, "Sure." I said, "No, it's the middle of January, so I'm wondering what does it mean help you on the farm in the middle of January?" And he said, "Yeah, we just got some stuff to do." I said, "What time do you want to leave tomorrow morning?" He said, 6. And I'm like, 6 o'clock in the morning. I came here to rest, not to. But anyway, we got up at 6, got in the car, we headed to the farm, and we get there about 9 o'clock in the morning, and it's like it's the middle of January. It's windy. I think it was 16 degrees, and the wind chill was 0. So we're going out into the barn at 0 degrees. Now I won't go into all the gory details, but the first thing I ever did with my father-in-law was slaughter a cow.
Oh my word. You
So,
got right in. Right
right.
in.
And he threw me right into the middle of it, and so we spent the entire day, preparing this cow for the butcher. And like I say, I won't get into the gory details, but at the end of the day, we looked like serial killers. I mean, we were covered from head to toe, and we're driving back from central Wisconsin back to Wilmot. And he's got this. At the time he had this old Plymouth Aspen station wagon, right? And we're driving down the road, and we're just at where 494 or 43, sorry, 43 and National Avenue meet on the west side of town. I'm sorry, that is 494. Anyway, we go right by the exit, and all of a sudden we run out of gas. Okay. Now it's at this point it's 9:30 on a Saturday night. It's dark out, and we start walking down, the highway to go back to the exit to get to a gas station. And I'll never forget, we walked into I think it was at the time of Super America, and the guy, I'll never forget the face on the guy when we walked into, because, like I said, we're wearing coveralls and we're covered in head to toe with, you know, tallow and blood and just hook. And the guy was reluctant to sell us some gas, but we got some gas, got back into the car, and were able to make it home. But I thought,
He didn't want to be part of the getaway.
oh man, yes, he was truly scared that we walked into his gas station that night. But anyway, so the thing about my father-in-law is he invited me into his world, and he believed in me before I believed in myself. And then, lo and behold, I was a radio guy. I loved radio. I grew up during the rock wars in Chicago, and we had radio stations, 3 radio stations back then, that just some fabulous entertaining, and I just wanted to be part of that world. So I started to work on improving my voice. I wanted to, because my voice wasn't very good back then. And this was late in high school, and it was kind of marble mouthed, and I didn't speak all that clearly, and so I took some time to really work on my diction and how I pronounce and being able to speak from your diaphragm and all that kind of stuff. So I got into radio, and I would say I had a good career. I was on the air for a while, and then the station I was working for at the time didn't really, they no longer liked my style, and so they put me on overnights. And overnights for about 6 months just about killed me. And this was a suburban Chicago radio station, so it wasn't the big time or anything then. And I went to just a resource, a general manager at a Chicago radio station, and I told him about, here's what I've done. What I'd like to do is own radio stations. What should I do next in my career? And he said, Mark, I think you need to get into sales. And I was like, oh man, sales. I don't want to be a sales guy. I never liked anything about sales. I never was attracted by the sales profession. But he said, if you're going to own a radio station, you need to know how this place makes money. And so you need to get into sales. So I went back to my boss. So Dave had only ever known me as a guy who wore jeans and t-shirts, because that's all we ever wore on, or nobody saw us, right? You either have a face for TV or a face for radio. And so I went to Dave, and I came into him, and I said, hey, after my shift, I said, hey, Dave, I want to get into sales. And he goes, Mark, I've never seen you in a suit. And I said, okay, stay here. So I went home, I put on my only suit, and I came back and I said, okay, here you go. This is what I look like in a suit. He says, okay, you're a sales guy. You start 2 weeks from Monday. So that's how I got my sales career started. It was because I came back and showed Dave what I looked like in a suit, So I got into sales. Now, I will say this. Today, I look back, and I think sales is one of the greatest professions on the planet. If you're truly a great salesperson and you treat it with the honor and professionalism it deserves, it is a great career, and it's a great way to help other people. But so many people treat it poorly. And when I first started, I loved talking about radio and how radio could benefit somebody. But I really hated the rejection. My expressive likes to be liked, and the lack of approval. I can remember after a week of calls. Now, our sales manager back then, he was a good guy, but he was a tough guy. He expected us to go down 5 to 6 personal face-to-face appointments a day, plus make 30 contact calls a day. But when it got to Friday afternoon, I could hardly stand it anymore. I can remember pulling off the road and just, you know, sitting back for 3 hours because the rejection was so high. And really, the reason I went through that in hindsight now is that I really think God was teaching me two things. One is um, you have to make a choice about whether or not you're going to give in to your fears or not, and whether or not you're going to let that stop you. And then the second thing is he really taught me through that experience how to communicate more effectively with people. You know, when you're doing 5 to 6 appointments a day and you're dealing with so many different people, you learn really quick how to adapt your communication to serve them all. So, those were some of the major milestones that God allowed me to walk. And then in 1989, October of 1989, Krista, I was the top dog at the radio station I was working for. We thought we were living the American dream, And Krista was pregnant. We had chosen that Krista would be a stay-at-home mom. She's a mom through and through, so she wanted to stay at home. We had 3 kids at home under 9, and lo and behold, she's pregnant with our fourth. And the baby is due at the was due at the end of November. This is the end of October, and Krista realized as she came home on a trip, the doctor said we could send her away before a few weeks before the baby came, and she realized something had changed, something was wrong. So we went to the doctor and went to the hospital actually here, and uh, she's in with the resident, and we're doing the ultrasound, and the resident says, "I'm sorry, there's no heartbeat." And so here we are, about 1 month away from having another baby in the house. And Dirk is his name. Dirk had passed away because of a cord accident. His cord got too long, and he passed through it and created a knot. And as he grew, it just killed him, took his life. So, wow, boom, here we are, a relatively young couple, 3 kids at home, under 9, and we are in shock. We had never been through anything like this before. And we'd gotten a piece of advice that first day. The grief counselor at the hospital came to us and said, okay, things like this usually do one of two things. They either drive couples together or drive them apart, or they drive them to God or drive them away from God. Choose wisely. And I'm so thankful that we were given that advice, because we chose to come together and chose to seek what was God wanting to do in this. Well, anyway, I called my boss and I said, hey, I'm going to be out for about 5 days. There's just some things that I have to take care of here with my family in the hospital and everything else. And on top of it, my sister-in-law and brother-in-law were getting married that weekend. So this is all going on at the same time. And so I told them I'm going to be out of pocket for a while. So the next morning, I get up and I realize, there's 2 things I have to take care of at the office. I'm sure everybody has experienced this. If you're working at any time, something like this comes up, and all of a sudden, if you don't deal with these 2 things, it's going to be a big problem. So I raced back to the office, and it took me 10 minutes to take care of this stuff, and I'm leaving quickly to go back to the hospital, and my boss stops me in the hallway. Now, as I said, this was the biggest challenge we had ever been through as a couple. And we just had, from our perspective, a child die, And my boss stops me in the hall as I'm leaving. And remember, I'm the top salesperson in the company. He goes, hey, Mark, I know you got a lot going on, but when are you going to get back to normal? And that was really not the right question for him to ask. and I didn't answer him. But as I walked out the door and got on the elevator, I remember thinking to myself, I'm never getting back to normal.
Right. Right.
So that was really the catalyzing event for what's next. So anything you want to share or ask about? So that brought me to the point where I knew I needed to make a change.
Yeah, well, there were a couple of things that came up that I know you've shared with me over the years, and I just wanted to kind of touch on a little bit. You mentioned about transcending our
Oh yeah,
parents when
yeah,
we've been
yeah.
coaching together before. And so I heard you basically say that there was that moment early on for you where you recognized my parents may not have my best interests at heart.
Hmm.
And so I wouldn't mind if you would speak a little bit to that, but I really love where you've taken us so far in the journey. And so I don't want to distract from that before we get
Yeah.
into, how you really got into coaching and the business of coaching, but just taking a moment to kind of highlight and touch on the importance of that you've seen over the years.
Yeah, that was a real hard one. And and I've talked to others since then, and basically their conclusion was, so technically you were abandoned. Now I didn't, and I think my parents loved me, cared for me in the way they could. You know, they were fearful people, and ultimately, even if you try to do the right thing for others, if you do it for self-serving reasons, it doesn't work. It doesn't count. And so, what really happened is that when that split occurred, when they took something that I felt was so precious and basically set it aside, and that separation occurred, then now we're in a different space. And I think, the things we've talked about as relates to this, Jamie, is that we tend to look up to our parents, right? And we tend to see them as very influential and leader-like in our life. And when you connect with a leader, any leader, at some level, I think everybody has an expectation that the leader is going to have my best interest at heart. Okay. And what I realized is because of my parents' fear is they really couldn't do that for me. So over the course of time, it turned into selfishness. They were being selfish. And again, yes, are they responsible? But I understand why. But for years, I was mad at them, and I thought, wait a second, how can you not believe in me? How can you not support me in this? And what happened when this ties together to this story is ultimately my parents they struggled with this for us, but really what it was more of is that they struggled with the grief of it for themselves. Okay.
Are you referring to that moment when you lost the baby that now you're bringing us forward and there
Bringing us to
was
them. Yeah.
they were around then and they found out about this and they had their own grief about it and that
Right.
got in the way of them being able to have your best interests at heart again?
Yeah. And what I realized, the connection to between the two. So from 15 to 34, I was really mad at them because I wanted for them to support me and my family, as I thought good parents would, right? But then I realized when this happened, when we lost the baby, and I saw their reaction to it, and that they were more consumed in their grief than they were concerned with our grief, right? What I realized in that moment, and people may disagree with this thought process, but what I realized in that moment is I had transcended my parents. And I realized that, you know, that, and it was very disappointing on the one hand, but on the other hand, it was liberating as well, is because I no longer was angry with them. I was actually more empathetic for them. But what I
Right, able to have
realized,
compassion. Yeah.
what's that?
Able to have compassion.
Yeah, yeah, my compassion went up, and that is a recommendation I make for people today is that when you see somebody's fear, turn up your compassion as much as you can. And that was the lesson I needed to learn. I was, um, again, some people disagree with this, but I was hoping for, expecting for support, and in that moment they were unable to give it. And it was at that moment I realized that I had
Hmm.
transcended them. And I think
So,
that's one of the hard lessons in leadership is that when you look up to somebody and you want them to be there for you and you want them to continue to show the way, and it's like, if they show the way, then that gives me hope that I can,
yes.
you
Yep.
know but then that all went away. And I think it's
Yeah.
a very in many cases it's a very sad and disappointing time.
This touches on something that I've been communicating more, as I start to even have awareness of it. I feel like often parents want to do what's best for their kids and they just want so much for their kids. And they're willing to spend money, they're willing to invest in them, time, resources, and then not realizing that often what the kids want is to see their parents living that so that they believe it's possible. And that's something that is sort of flipping the switch on the thought process. Like,
Hmm.
are your kids looking for you to invest in them, or are they looking for you to invest in yourself?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think what do we want our parents to do? To show the way, right? And the kind of the rest of the story with my parents, where this was really revealed, is that we got pregnant again, okay, and we lost a child again. Now it wasn't at 8 months; it was at more like 5 months, stillbirth.
Wow.
And of course, what do? You call your parents and tell them what's happened. And this was the response from my mom. I'll never forget it on the phone call. I said, Mom, we were kind of waiting to tell everybody, but Krista was pregnant and we miscarried. We lost that child. And I remember her saying, she said, oh, Mark, she said, how could you do this
What?
to me? Yeah, how could you do this to me? And it was because uh, the losing Dirk had caused so much grief and pain that she struggled with how we could even entertain the thought of getting pregnant again. So that's when I realized it wasn't about us anymore. It wasn't about me. It was about her. And she didn't want to go through that grief or mourn like that again. And and I think that's to your point, Jamie. I think that's part of the responsibility we have as parents. I mean, um, and it really goes back to what my father-in-law did for me. Is our role as parents is to believe in our children before they believe in themselves, and then they may draw a very different circle in life than we do, right? And they may go through some very significant challenges. um, in the end, their life is their choice, right? I mean, our role as parents changes as they get older, right? We don't tell them what to do. We try to do the best to help them live the life they want to live. And um, this is about being willing to go through the challenges they're going to have and their challenges they're going to face. And you can't always predict what that's going to be, but you know, we stand firm in those moments.
So you shared, I think, with me the bike story.
Bike story. Oh, with Heather?
Who believes in you? I thought this came from you, but maybe it wasn't. Like thinking about someone teaching you how to ride a bike,
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know if we
and you
talked
don't
about
always
this.
know.
Hmm.
They didn't know. You don't know how to ride the bike, but then someone holds it and just says ride.
All right.
They believe in
Go.
you.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right. Yeah. And I think it's in those moments we have to be, and we're gonna walk alongside, especially from a leadership or a coaching perspective. That's really what the work is. It's, I hear of these coaches today who are trying to tell people, well, this is what you do and everything will work out. I never really see that work, you know. And I think this is about coming alongside of the other people and, being able to believe in them before they believe in themselves, and also suffer the grief as they suffer grief and celebrate joy as they celebrate joy. I mean, it's not removing the challenges they face, but it's believing them through the challenges they face. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's really more the work. And the fact is, just to wrap up this piece about transcendence, is my parents could no longer do that for me because it was too painful for them.
Yeah. So then can you take us back to the early days of when you decided the radio station is no longer for you and what was next?
So yeah, so out of this experience, I lost all my passion for radio went away, and now I look back, and radio today is really just a fraction of what it was back then. But I lost all passion, so I really started to asking God, what am I here for, God? What do you want me to do? And that question my boss asked me, when are you going to get back to normal, really was seared into my thought process. So I started looking. I started to go on a journey to try to find what I was supposed to do in life. And one of the first things I did is, man, did my reading chunk up a notch. I started reading 4 books a week. I knew that I had to change how I was thinking about things. So, along with studying the Bible, I started just reading a lot.
How did you pick
Naked,
what
what's that?
how did you pick what books that you were reading and where did you
Yeah, I
find
mean,
them?
some of it was just recommendations from other people I trusted. Some of it was just my own research. Um, a books that really helped me. So one of the first books I ever read when I was on this path was The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino. Okay. And it's really not about selling per se, but it's about, he really talked about how you have to really work on your mind, and how you think about yourself and how you think about others. So often today you hear of people that are struggling with serving others, and it's because they think they have to be somebody else in order to do that. And that's not true. God created each person for a purpose. He's given each of us gifts and talents to fulfill our purpose and work prepared in advance to do. So the one thing I really work with people today is, hey, be who you were created to be. That's okay. That's good. And that a lot of it has to do with the disc. But then be able to adapt yourself to the situation you're in, and do the right thing for others, regardless of how it makes you feel. So often people don't want to confront others, but we need to be able to tell each other the truth in love, right? And the two go hand in hand. You can't do one without the other. Truth without love is mean. Love without truth is mush. So you can't do that. You have to do both. And I think that that was one of the first things I learned, is that you have to accept who you are. God put you here for a reason. Don't deny that. Another great book I read was that's in the early days was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Okay, great book. And he just talked about how, the fascinating story about survivors in the Nazi concentration camps. You know, it wasn't the ones that were treated better. It was the ones that had purpose, and they made it about serving others in the camp with them. 2 more. Um, so for some reason, remember M. Scott Peck wrote the book, The Road Less Traveled? Okay.
Yes, he also wrote.
People of the Lie. And I don't know. I was intrigued about reading People of the Lie, and I read People of the Lie, and boy, did it, wow, knock me off my feet. And that is when I learned um, why the depth of fear is uh, such a such a such a bad thing, because it makes us do evil. Taken to an extreme, it makes us do evil, and that's where really selfishness. He helped me understand really what selfishness is all about. And then the last one, the one that kind of kicked me over was Inside Out. Oh man, who wrote that book? Dr. David. Oh, I can't remember right now. I want to say Dr. David Chapman. I don't think that's right, but it's Inside Out. And that book really taught me that um, I am not here for myself. You know, I am here for other people. That this is about service to others, right? The great commandment: love the Lord your God with all your mind, your soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. It's those two things. We don't have to really worry about the rest. And so, those were really foundational books that helped me, solidify and mature my thinking about this. So I'm reading all this, and then I stayed at the station another 9 months, which was miserable. Then I went to work for a training company. Really loved that company. Loved the facilitator we had, the owner of the company, and I really believed in what we did. And what the company was about was teaching people new skill sets to make a difference, in their workplaces. But the problem was is that we weren't really dealing with changing their motivation. Okay, we were dealing with giving them new skill sets, but not good reasons why to use them. And so the promises we made with clients never really took place. And that's when I realized that it was the motivation behind the behavior that we had to pay attention to, not just the behavior. Um, so I stayed with them for about a year, and then I left. I needed a job, and I went back into radio. And it was a smaller station. I hated it, and I wasn't making a lot of money. And so it's late 1991, and I go to our senior pastor at our church, and he and I had known each other for a little while, a couple of years. And I said, Pastor Bill, I need some counsel. I said, here's my story. So I laid out the story. I've got this job. I'm working at a radio station right now. I can do it, but I've lost all passion for it. I really hate it. And it's not enough money. Krista's a stay-at-home mom, and we've got 3 kids under 9, and I need to take care of the family. And I said, I've got another job like it, but it's a guaranteed income. I could really use it. But again, it's just more of the same. And then I said, and now I've got this wild, crazy-haired idea to start my own business, but I don't have any training, education, background, history, nothing. I got nothing. And he looked at me, and I'm really, I'm serious, I'm somber, I'm really looking for answers. And he goes, Mark, what would be fun? And I looked at him and I said, what would be fun? I said, Pastor Bill, I'm not talking about having fun. I was incredulous. I couldn't believe he asked me that question. And he goes, I don't know. I think God wants you to have fun. So I said, well, I guess it would be fun to start my own thing. But I told him I got nothing. And he said, well, I think you got a decision to make. So I took that to heart. I went home, prayed about it with Krista. We talked about it. And I got to tell you, to this day, so Krista also exemplifies what it means to believe in others before they believe in themselves, because she did that for me. And either the next day or the day later, I quit my job.
Wow.
And now I didn't have anything. Okay. I didn't have any client. I had an idea, but I didn't have any clients, And so I had a card table and a chair and a telephone. And I didn't have a typewriter, so I had to go to the public library. locally. And I wrote up a one sheet. I still have a copy of it today. And it was 4 concepts that I thought I could teach in companies to start to move in this direction. So I went to 5 businesses that I knew of, and I needed $2,500 in January of '92 to uh, to make it. If I didn't have that, it was going to be really bad. And so I went to 5 businesses. Out of the 5, 3 said yes, and they agreed to pay me in advance, and it was $2,700. And so on January 4th, 1992, in Brookfield, Illinois, I stood in front of my, first company team and started talking about these concepts. And that was 30 years ago.
That is so amazing.
That's how I
I
started.
know that you've encouraged us in a similar way to believe in ourselves before we, you believe in us before we believe in ourselves.
Right. How
And
could I not, Jamie, after that story, right?
right. And then, encouraging, being really encouraging about it's what would be fun. And Mark, sometimes when you have 6 kids like we do, that sounds like
Oh,
a crazy question.
right. It sounds like a crazy question, doesn't it? It
Yeah.
really does. But it really is the right question. And when I started, I really didn't know what I was doing. I mean, and the people that the companies that hired me, I think they hired me purely on enthusiasm. You know, but as I start, what I really believed starting the business is that if you make this about helping others succeed first, you don't make it about your own back pocket or money. If you make it about helping others succeed first, then you'll succeed. And it was really went back to 1 Corinthians 13, right? If you do anything without love, it doesn't mean anything, right? It's a clanging cymbal and or a bell. And so, I really started to refine and do the work from that perspective. And you've heard, I think, a lot of my stuff, right? And I have some stuff today, right? I didn't have much stuff back then, but I have stuff today. And it's all central around that theme. And back when I started, I really believed it would make a difference. But after 30 years of doing this, I know it makes a difference. And I count what I do a tremendous privilege because I get a chance to do what I was created for every single day. And I've had an opportunity to work with some tremendous people in some tremendous companies, and we've done some unbelievable work. And I've actually had people come back to me, and we've gone through some really, I mean, I've gone through some really difficult stuff. I'll just tell a couple quick stories here. So I remember I was working for this printing company, and the company wasn't doing well, and they were still, investing in me, and um, so a buddy of mine went in. I had worked with them for about 12 months, and he went in and he audited their books, and he came back out. He was a CPA. He came back out and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "What are you doing to these people?" I said, "Well, I'm helping them." I said, "Mark, they can't afford this, you know." And I tried to explain to him. I said, "I understand this, but they're making an investment, and they have to make this investment not only in me. I mean, I got to get paid, and that's not the most important thing, but they need to make this investment for themselves. They need to believe that they can navigate these waters." Well, he was mad at me, and it really impacted negatively our friendship. But after 18 months, right, we turned it around, started turning it around. And we worked together for the next 3.5 years.
I like what you're
And
saying there, Mark. Just thinking about that, even giving space for that 18 months and that 3.5 years, because sometimes the question is, how long did it take us to get into this mess? Even personally, when we want to do this work personally,
Hmm.
it takes some time because you didn't create this mess overnight.
No, no, and changing your thinking at a company level can be very, very difficult. And this was a family-owned business, so that puts English in everything. But the next 3.5 years, they had the best growth, largest profits, best reputation they'd ever had. And so everything they invested and all the struggle they went through was taken care of in spades on the other side of the equation. And I've got story after story of companies that went from where the majority of people in the organization were self-serving to where the majority of the people in the organization served others. And it was some of the hardest, most challenging, but most exciting and successful work some of these people have ever been a part of. And I've had a number of people in my career come back and tell me after, and the hard thing for me is when we take so much time to rebuild an organization from the inside out. Another story. I worked with this third-party administrator, and so I'll never forget. I met the president and the second in command, and we're having lunch, and they said, "We want to see if you can help us." I said, "Okay," and they said, "We're fractured," and they proceeded to tell me that the team had come together young, and they thought they were a team, but then fourth quarter hit, and in third-party administration, that's when the crunch hits. And the reason why teams break down is in many reasons because of unmet expectations. People think you're going to do something. You haven't really told them. They think you're going to do something, but they don't do it. You don't do it. And then you've let them down, right? So the team fractured right in half. So we started working together. And again, 18 months. It took 18 months, to get it all back to a great foundation. And this is where, people are in it to help each other succeed. Teamwork is at a max. Productivity is sky high. They're growing like crazy. Profitability is, off the Richter scale. And all of a sudden, the silent partner decides that, so this is the message. I can't believe it. To this day, I can't believe this. He comes in, he goes, I have to get involved. And we said, why? Isn't this working out for you? Isn't this going well? He said, yeah, but this is becoming too big a part of my portfolio. Okay. Well, okay, but it's working. Why? So lo and behold, he gets involved, and what does he do? He demotes the president, fires me, and invests in a god awful amount of money in software that they didn't need. Okay. Over the next 2 years, totally dismantled what we built. Right. This is, and I had a number of people in that organization come back to me and say, that was one of the greatest experiences of my life, is being able to build something like that. The rest of the story is he dismantled it, turns around and sells it so this is 2 years and 6 months after we hit our peak, right, in culture, everything else. What happens? A fist fight breaks out on the floor of the company that acquired them. That's how far it fell. And that's the thing. If you make this about money, if you make this about something other than helping others succeed, it's not going to turn out well. You can make money. There's no doubt about that. But you'll never have the complete success that you can have when you make it about helping others succeed first, and you commit yourself to doing right by others. And like I say, I've been a part of some tremendous stories that I count dear to myself. And so that, when we talk about coaching today and what it means to be a coach, um, like I say, I am honored and privileged to be able to do this every day. And I've paid a dear price to get to this spot. You know, your husband and I were talking about this, and he was telling me about a company that does coaching certification. You know, I think we've talked about this. And I said, really? There's a certification program for coaches? And he goes, yeah. And I said, well, what do they say? Well, they say you have to go through this. You have to either go through this curriculum or you have to create a curriculum and then you can be certified as a coach. I said, cool. Can I be grandfathered in or something, or do I have to do something? And well, according to this, you have to do something. I asked him, I said, so Kevin, how long has this company been around? He said, 27 years. I said, I guess I'm good. I've been around 30, so I
So
got my
that's
certification.
that's awesome. How, if you know, do you
Yeah.
know how many coaching sessions, like how many does that add up to? What, like, they want hours of service.
Hours of service. Oh, I tried to figure this out once, and I'm probably, I don't know. So 30 years, I have probably averaged at least 15 meetings a week. Okay.
Wow.
So that's 750 meetings a year on average. Times 30 years, that's 21, 22, 23,000
That's amazing.
hours of coaching, whether group or individual.
And
I looked at it. What's
how
that?
many social media ads did you do?
Uh, None.
The the new coaches coming into the scene today are being told, create a course, do social media ads, and that's not at all what your
It
experience has
wasn't
been.
my path. I'm sure that some of that works. I'm sure you could, that's a path and maybe it's a more efficient path, but that wasn't my path. And I really learned early on. So I believe that in order to serve others, the, right, and we're teaching others to pay their price to be successful, right? That's what you're actively involved in right now. And so people have to pay their price to be successful. Well, what that means in my world, and again, maybe I did it too long, too slow, I don't know, but is that I've paid the price to be successful. I've driven the miles. I remember I had a client in Minneapolis, and I would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and drive to Minneapolis for a 9 o'clock meeting. I remember I had to meet with a team long ago, a corporate team, and the only time they could meet was 3 o'clock in the morning. So I'd meet them at 3 o'clock in the morning. I mean, I've met whenever people have needed it. I've done some I would tell you, taken on very challenging, difficult situations. So, if you approach this job, if you approach the job of coaching, that makes it about serving other people, then it's not going to fit easily into a box. So one more story. So this was a tough one. And this was early on. This was 1992. So this is within my first 6 months. And I'm doing one-on-ones at this accounting firm. And I always do one-on-ones with the group I'm going to work with because I want to look at life through their eyes and be able to understand where they're coming from. And I'm sitting across from this young woman. She's just recently joined the firm. And I'm just, hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you. Love to hear your story. What would you like to share about yourself? And she doesn't answer. Okay. And I wait just a little bit, give her some time. Um, I'm sorry, is there anything holding you back? I mean, what would you like to tell me? I'd like to learn more about you. That's what I'm here for. And all of a sudden, she starts to break down a little bit. And again, I don't know what's going on at all, but again, my trying to make sure I'm compassionate and empathetic. I said, "Is there anything I can help you with? What's going on?" And she proceeds to tell me that 2 weeks earlier she had been raped and she hadn't told anybody else. I was the first person she had told.
Wow.
And I said, "Wow, I am so sorry to hear that. We have resources here. Let's get people involved." So, the person that had brought me in, I went out and got her. I brought her in, and we proceeded to get this young woman, the help she needed, as much as humanly possible. Um, so when that first happened, I kind of asked, God, why that? Why? Because I felt ill-equipped to respond appropriately to this young woman. But it happened on my watch, and I think that's what coaching is really about, from what I can tell, from my experience, is we're supposed to be here for other people. We're supposed to believe in them before they believe in themselves. We're supposed to help them succeed, and in helping them succeed, we succeed. And, one thing I tell people all the time is that, do not give undue power or influence to those who cannot or will not have your best interest at heart. And, my commitment as a coach in the life of my clients and the people I work with is that I will believe in you before you believe in yourself. And I will believe longer than the doubters doubt. And that's how I built my success after 30 years.
Mark, I really appreciate you telling that story and sharing all of the other stories along the way. This is huge for just awareness in the coaching industry in general, because there's a lot of noise, and I would love for this message to be shared to help others on their journey.
Well, and I believe in you before you believe in yourself. And I'm really glad, Jamie, that you're on the front end of this. We need more good coaches out in the world. There's far more work than any one person could possibly do. And so I'm excited to be a part of your journey.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much.